Hi, I'm Rosemary Barton. A new federal agency will look for ways to shave Ottawa's $5 billion annual IT bill. The announcement from Public Works Minister Rona Ambrose and Treasury Board President Tony Clement comes alongside reports of hundreds of layoffs at Environment Canada. It's part of the government's promise to cut costs and balance the budget by 2014. But do the Conservatives really have clear criteria for coming budget cuts, and how deep will those cuts go? Joining me now is the President of the Treasury Board, Tony Clement. Good to see you, Mr. Clement.
Nice to be back.
Let's start with your announcement today, the IT savings, trying to streamline here. We know that you're looking for savings, you've created this new agency to try and get them. That doesn't sound like the most obvious thing to do, is create something new when you're trying to get savings. How are you going to make these savings? How much are you looking for?
In fact, what this is about is consolidation of IT services. And we needed to get a kind of a common management of this, because it was spread all over all the departments and all the agencies. There were over 100 different ways that people were accessing their email.
Stunning.
There's 300 data
strange,
centers, 3,000 different bits of network. So to have a deputy minister and a common CEO of all of that, we're not hiring extra people down the line, but what we're doing is we're allowing for some accountability, and they can then in turn consolidate all of this and make it a lot more sensible for people. So that's actually a good example of something that actually won't reduce necessarily the numbers of people working for the federal government, but it'll actually find some savings, and their target is $100 million to $200 million as an agency that has just been created as part of our deficit reduction plans.
Right. I would imagine, though, there's only so many of those types of things that you can do without getting rid of jobs. I mean, just this morning we read about the 700 jobs at Environment Canada, a lot of them through attrition, 400 through attrition, so maybe that makes sense. And I know that those aren't your cuts precisely, but what message do you think it sends when it comes from Environment Canada? Sometimes your government is sort of criticized for the way it approaches the environment, and here you've got a lot of cuts, 11% of the workforce coming from that one department.
Well, I can't entirely speak for Minister Peter Kent, but I think if were he here, he would say, look, we're still focused on our core mandate: cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner environment for Canadians. That hasn't changed, and we can do that more efficiently as a result of some of the re-engineering he's doing in the department. Generally, what we've said in terms of the public service and the number of employees, incidentally, this year was the first year in a number of years that the total number of public services actually declined. Most years that we've been in power, it's actually increased. But generally what we're saying is, look, we know that there is a possibility of staff reductions. We know that 11,000 people leave the civil service every year. They retire, they quit, they find a new job elsewhere. So we're going to try to, as best as we can, look after people through the attrition and that way not have the same impact in terms of job reduction. At the same time, our goal is very clear. We want to find $4 billion in savings. That's out of an $80 billion worth of program budget. 5%. We think that that's reasonable. We think it's doable. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's doable.
So you'll still ask for the 5% from Environment Canada?
Absolutely, we will. Okay. We're asking 67 departments and agencies to give us two scenarios. Give us a 5% reduction, give us what a 10% reduction looks like, and then my committee that has been struck by the Prime Minister to look at these things will then look at each department, each agency to see which is appropriate. Okay,
so we've gone back and looked at some of the memos that Mr. Flaherty actually had drawn up based on the lessons learned from 94 and 95 and the way the Liberals approached it then. And it is sort of interesting, the listing of the criteria that they put forward in terms of determining how things should be cut and what should be cut. What are some of the principles or criteria that are going to guide you? Because I know you've at least started the meetings now in terms of how to get this going. What are the criteria that you're going to set out in terms of making these cuts?
Sure. A couple things. First of all, unlike what happened in the mid-90s with the Liberals, we're not cutting transfer payments on healthcare social services to the provinces. We're not cutting individual transfers like EI or old age security. Those are all red-circled, not part of this. That leaves $80 billion of program spending. So we've asked each department and agency to say, look, what can be done in a different way? Are there different managerial techniques? Are there using IT? These kinds of things. Can you deliver the service in a better way? Second question is, does this service really need to be delivered? Or is there a better way to deliver it by another agency or
By another level of government?
By another level of government, or by maybe this is something that is inappropriate now for government to be involved in after several decades of being involved in it. So those kinds of questions. Or the third question is, what can you do in terms of delivering the service in a better way that is still a good service but has a different technique? So we are asking these things of each of the 67 departments and agencies. They're going to come back in the fall with their response to those kinds of questions. And so what I look at it as, obviously this is primarily about getting back to a balanced budget, reducing the deficit to zero. So that's a commitment we made to the people. But it's also about managing better internally.
Sure,
and
but I'm not sure
better.
I still understand, and I think that this is what's going to be the problem for Canadians going forward, is how you decide what is a program that the federal government should be using or offering or not. Like, what criteria are you going to use to say, yes, this service makes sense for us to give to Canadians?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking at is saying, is this still part of the mandate of this particular department or agency? Is it something that Canadians expect of their federal government?
But, you know, some Canadians are going to say, of course, yeah. I expect that.
And I'm going to absolutely, you're right, and I'm going to boldly predict that certain members of the Public Service Union or others are going to say, no matter what you do, you shouldn't be cutting this. And ultimately, I think what people are saying to us is, look, we elected you, we elected a majority government. Make a decision that is reasonable and sensible, and Canadians will support that. And that's what we're going to do.
One of the other things that the lessons learned from 94, 95 that I found so interesting is public awareness. They basically said that in order to make the difficult choices, you have to be able to explain it to the public. And up until now, you've been working behind the scenes, but up until now, we haven't heard a lot about how the process is unfolding, how you're making the decisions, why you're making the decisions. How much are you going to do with that in the fall when you start announcing some of these cuts? Because that's going to be hard for people to digest, and they may not always understand why you're asking them to make sacrifices.
Sure. Well, the first thing is none of this really comes to fruition until the budget, the next budget.
Right.
So we're looking at
So you'll never give us a hint of where things are coming
Well,
from.
I think it's an ongoing process. We're going to be, all of these suggestions are going to come in from the different departments and agencies. We've got to look at each one, and then we've got to look at the macro impact, make sure that we don't miss something, because individually a change might be appropriate, but when you look at the combined effect, maybe it's something that we don't want to do. So all I can tell you is I'm going to continue to communicate with Canadians as to what we're about, but what I'm hearing back from Canadians is, look, don't talk to me. We know what you have to do. Go out and do it, and make sure you make the right decisions for Canadians, and that's where there's going to be a difference of opinion. I get that, but ultimately they're expecting us to act in the public interest, and that's what we've got to do.
So we're not going to know anything, though, about the ongoing process until the outcome.
Well, the outcome is Budget 2012, and that's when all of this will be very clear. Absolutely.
Okay, so you won't come back onto Power and Politics and give us hints as you're going through what each department is suggesting?
You know, I think that would be inappropriate, because the fact is suggestions are suggestions, but they're not government policy until the Cabinet Committee has passed an opinion on it. And we're not going to pass an opinion on everything until we've gone through everything and then gone through it a second time.
That might make people nervous, though.
Look, in the public service, the people are wondering, is my program safe? Is my job safe? I get that. And I'm trying to make this as humane as possible. And I've been asking managers, personnel, everybody, if you've got some ideas, bring them forward. We'd love to hear your suggestions as well. So we're trying to make this an open and consultative process. At the end of the day, I think it's in our interest, that is to say the public interest, to make the decisions and get it done and book it. And then we know we've found our savings. We know we can get back to a balanced budget by 2014, a year ahead of schedule. And that's what Canadians expect of us. So this is going to take several months. Yeah. It's not going to take several years.
I promised our Twitter followers I'd ask you about your sideburns.
Yes, it's become a matter of great public interest today. It's a little bit of a summer project.
It's your summer look.
I promised my wife that they'd be gone by September, though, so okay. Don't worry, folks.
Thanks for your time, Minister. Appreciate it.
Thank you.